Dr. Mendoza, good evening. Thank you for talking to us tonight.
Good evening.
Everybody's getting very upset about us, very concerned about it, but nobody seems to be prepared to do anything. There's not a lot anybody can do anyway, is there?
Well, there's plenty that people can do, actually, as it happens. I mean, I think, look, you start off, obviously, from a position of revulsion, and there has been a sickening crime. The cover-up has been absurd, the way the Saudis have changed their story constantly. But within that, you can see already the path to where some action can be, because the very fact that the Saudis have blinked, as it were, in the face of world pressure, and have changed their story and seem willing, I wouldn't quite say to do a full and fair investigation, but to cooperate more than others, is a positive compared to the behavior of, say, Vladimir Putin and Russia, who lie, refuse to cooperate, and, in fact, honor the murderers in that way. I think the opportunity exists, given how the Saudis have responded, to apply pressure to the Saudi government to make changes internally and indeed to punish some people, and to see if this horrific act can lead to a better future through governance reform.
I mean, yeah, that's all well and good, but they've never reformed. Why would they reform now? I mean, they carry out public executions, women can be locked away, men can be killed for being gay. I mean, it is an appalling situation, most of it based on ridiculous religion as well. So I don't actually understand how any other country can make them change. That's the way they are. That's the way they've always been, and we're frightened of losing huge business orders.
Well, that might have been true in the past. The difference is, firstly, that they have been undergoing this theoretical, at least, process of reforming internally, and the idea, therefore, is that they're on a reform track. Now, we can argue about that and talk about whether that's true or not, but the reality is...
Well, is it true?
Well, I think there have been elements that have changed. Not that I'm celebrating the fact that women can drive suddenly in Saudi Arabia, but it's a change. The promise to put the clerical establishment back in their box and stop funding foreign extremism in our country and other countries is certainly something that we need and have been desperate for some time. The reaching out to different countries in the region to try and form alliances is certainly different. I think if you start down that path of reaching out in a different way to how you acted in the past, you've got a choice as that country to either decide we're going to continue on that path, even though it's now going to be painful given what we've done, or you have to go back to what you were beforehand. But the reality is you can't go back. After an event like this, an atrocity-driven response is often what you see in international affairs. And this is one of those times.
All right, even though the king, I think, has said that this will be investigated and those who carried it out will be brought to book. Now, hang on. It was done in the Saudi embassy. It was done by a lot of people close to the royal family. They chopped this poor bloke up and buried him in the garden. I mean, they didn't even expect anybody to say anything about it, did they?
No, I mean, the case here, well, I think the whole crime, as I said, was shocking. It was shocking in terms of what it was and shocking in terms of how incompetent it was handled as well. The idea that they thought they could get away with it tells you something. It tells you that you've got a regime that's sort of out of control, that's not checking what it's doing even.
So why don't we kick them out of the country? Why don't we say to them, get out, sling your hook, go?
Well, when you say what? Kick out the Saudi ambassador, you're saying?
Kick out the whole, the Saudi ambassador.
Well, because we don't do that. We didn't do that when the Russians killed British citizens on our soil.
Well, why don't we do it? Why are we even bothering?
Why base recognition that in international affairs, at times you've got to talk to people as much as you might dislike what they're doing, as much as you want to, again, as you say, throw them out, throw the book out. You hope that you can exact more from them by talking to them and pressuring them than by just cutting off relations. Now, at a certain point, you may have to go, this is not working, this is crazy, we're the mugs here. But I don't think we're anywhere near that point with the Saudis. On the contrary, all the evidence shows that pressure is working.
Well, we've never done it yet, and they have continued on their way. And every time they are caught, we've had a go at them about what they're doing in Yemen, yet they've said, oh, no, we're not doing it, and we've turned a blind eye. They have been responsible for various other atrocities in their own country and elsewhere. We've turned a blind eye. The same with Russia. They're building up their armaments in Russia. Apparently, we know this. Our secret service know they're doing this, yet we're doing nothing about it. if we don't actually make a stand, it's all right saying, well, we keep talking to them. Every MP I talk to says, we keep talking to them, it'll be fine. I think that they're just laughing behind their hands, aren't they?
Well, it's not quite so simple. Let's look at Russia for a second, and we'll look at Saudi Arabia. In the Russian case, we forged an international coalition of parties who've condemned them, who've imposed sanctions of various kinds, who've put human rights sanctions on them. It's not true that nothing has been done. The vice is being very, very slowly turned on the Russians. Now, it's slow, I agree with you, but it's having an impact. Now, the Russian model, as a result, can give you a sense of what could be achieved with the Saudis. If they don't choose reform of their own volition, we can slowly crank things up. I mean, it seems perfectly possible to me to apply the same kinds of human rights sanctions that we put on high-ranking Russians to the Saudis, if necessary, as a starting point, and then to look at other measures if they don't reform following that point. So it's not quite true to say we're not doing anything. We are turning that vice. It's slow, but it has to be a slow process because you're not going to invade Russia, you're not going to invade Saudi Arabia.
Well, no, we're not. And I don't think they're ever going to invade us, but we don't have to get on with them if we don't like the way they behave.
I'm sure about the Russians, actually.
What, you think they might invade us?
Not invade, but certainly exert their influence over us, yes.
In what way?
Well, they've already been doing it. The fake news, the interference in Western politics, left, right and centre. Is that not exerting influence? Is that not interfering in our domestic affairs?
In that case, why don't we be a little tougher on them? I mean, I know you say we've imposed all these sanctions, but actually, to be fair, they can do more or less whatever they want. It doesn't seem to be having much effect. And yes, of course, they are still using social media against us, and we seem to be a little slow in coming back with that. You're absolutely right. I mean, that sort of invasion is far more likely, and it may well even be going on as we speak, than an invasion of nuclear weapons.
Yes, of course. I mean, when you look at the sort of asymmetric warfare that's being waged essentially by the Russians, the information warfare, it's here and there. Of course, there are things you can do. You can shut down Russia Today, for example. You can shut down the propaganda outlets and kick at that point. You're not going to be able to change necessarily the dynamics of Twitter or Facebook overnight. That requires assistance over there. But it's really about an effective international response. One country doing it on its own tends not to be effective, unless that country is the USA, for example. But if it's not the USA, you've got to patch together a network of countries willing to say, you've behaved badly, whether that is Russia or Saudi Arabia or anyone else for that matter, and now we're going to start to bring you to book. Now, it's your choice. You can come on board with that process and reform, or we're going to continue turning the vice.
If we do that to Saudi Arabia, then surely the threat is that they can turn the oil off to this country, and that's what lots of people are frightened of. Plus, of course, they spend a lot of money in this country, and that would harm our economy as well.
Well, that is, of course, the consideration why people aren't rushing straight away to kind of, have at them. The point is, look, can this reform process be pushed through diplomatic pressure without requiring further concessions? And I think a lot of that depends on where the Saudis see themselves going forwards. Is it back to the bad old days, or is it we're actually wanting to reform and change? This has been a huge setback in that process, but we actually recognise that is where we need to go. Remember what they're trying to do. Vision 2030 is to turn Saudi Arabia into a more normal country than what it is today. They recognise that themselves. Are they going to junk that? Well, they could do it, but then they're going to, kick away the future of their country as well. So there is an incentive for them to participate.
Why would they do this? Why would they murder this guy in their embassy and invite these 15, 18 people into the embassy to carry this out, thinking they could get away with it, and then pretending it was nothing to do with them?
Well, the second bit is easy to explain. It's a classic cover-up. But the first bit is far more difficult to sort of understand. I don't think we have the answer to who thought this was a good idea, who ordered it, why it was done, and the rest of it. To most of us, it wouldn't make much sense. Even if a distant journalist was annoying you, why would you seek to have them murdered in such a way? Was that the plan? I don't know. I don't think anyone is. Even President Erdogan, who claims to know, didn't reveal very much today.
He didn't, no, and I sat and watched his interview. I was a bit upset at the end. I'm wasting my time.
Well, exactly. So I think the reality is none of us know the answers to why this happened, who ordered it, and what the purpose of it was for. And until we do, we're going to be a bit in the dark about that bit. What we can clearly see, though, is that there has been a cover-up.
I mean, going back to the women demonstrators who demonstrated and took action to get permission for women to be able to drive in Saudi Arabia, and women can now, I think, drive in Saudi Arabia. I think it's only certain days of the week or something, isn't it?
I don't know the details, but you can see that women are driving, which is a huge achievement for women in Saudi Arabia, even though everyone else would regard this as being absolutely normal.
But the women who did demonstrate and got this pushed through have all been arrested.
Yes, because they've been regarded as dissidents. And this was what indeed Mr. Khashoggi was saying. He was saying under the crackdown, under the current regime, it's not dissidents even they're targeting. It's just anyone with an independent mind. That was one of his quotes he gave just before he was disappeared.
All right. Good to talk to you. Do you think this story is now going to fizzle out and we will forget all about it? Or do you think that the international community will actually do something about it?
I think there's going to need to be some action on the part of the Saudis in response to this. I think the action they take will then be assessed by the international community, and things will happen after that. Just remember, for example, with the case of the Novichok case in Salisbury, it took a while for all the evidence to be pieced together and for action to be taken. So I don't think this will be forgotten, even if it goes quiet for a time.
All right. Alan, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Alan Mendoza, founder and the executive director of the Henry Jackson Society.